Good morning and welcome. Welcome to this webcast that we're going to be doing. Today, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity for small businesses and startups. If you work in a small business or in a startup, you're probably aware of the unique challenges facing small businesses. And I'd like to start off with a little story that tells how my organization and how I got into focusing on cybersecurity for small companies. So I started my agency several years ago. Been doing security consulting for large clients for a number of years. And then a few years ago, I was doing a pen test for a bank. This was a relatively large bank here in the Southeast United States, very well funded when it came to cybersecurity. Excellent team. They had some professionals, ex-DOD, Department of Defense, ex-military, some ex-consultants from some pretty well-known companies who've done some pretty amazing things in security. So they had a well-equipped team. And so on this penetration test, it was an internal assessment, and I was sniffing wireless traffic. So the short version is their CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, would connect to the guest Wi-Fi when he came down for meetings. They had a network access control in place that was MAC address based. It would block devices joining the network based on their MAC address, if they're allowed or not. I, sniffing guest traffic on the guest floor, found some MAC addresses connected, and one of them happened to be the CISO's. Later in the engagement, when I was able to gain access to a floor, I cloned or spoofed my MAC address rather to look like that one, and boom, company-wide access. So I wrote that finding up. The organization spent over $100,000 on a new network access control software, and they misconfigurations, oversights, they missed some ports. So it turns out the next year when I came back for another assessment, some of those ports had not been secured. There were open ports. And I was able to find an open port and boom, again, gain access to that company's network. On the same engagement, I got a call from someone who owned a small business. Their business had been hacked. They had some questions, wanting to know what they could do to recover from this hack and what to do moving forward to prevent it. And they had a small business. They didn't have $100,000 like was spent on this one control, would have built their entire security program and then some because of their budget restraints. And when I was a system administrator at a company, we had the same issue. We were a small company. We didn't have big budget. We didn't have the quote Maseratis of security tools. We had to do what we could with the free tools we had, the operating systems, hardening the OS, etc., and the little bit of budget we did have for security. So I started helping my friend out, and we started getting more of these inquiries, help for small businesses. And I started realizing how neglected small businesses are when it comes to security. So since then, my company, CyberX, has been focused on the security needs of small and mid-sized companies. Putting out resources, we do virtual summits a few times a year, trying to help small companies build out effective and affordable security programs. And that is why we're here today. This training, this workshop, is about a roadmap that we've developed over the last 4 or 5 years working with small companies to allow you, IT professionals, business managers at small companies, to implement security in a way that's effective and affordable. So, how do you know the state of your security? Do you find yourself wondering this? We've done X, Y, and Z to try to improve our security. What else can we do to tighten things up? Do you find yourself wondering this? I get this question all the time. My team at my agency, we get this question from small companies all the time. What else can we do to secure things? We can't do 100%, but what is that 80% that we can do that's going to give us the most results? What's that 20% we can do that's going to give us the 80% of results? How do I create a cybersecurity plan? You find yourself wondering this? Where do I even start? What is a cybersecurity plan? Or another common question is cyber attacks are on the rise. What can we do to protect our business? Do you find yourself wondering this? And those are all great questions because the modern threat landscape is changing. I know a lot of salespeople in security try to scare small businesses, try to scare people. A breach can cost you this, it'll shut your business down. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to get into FUD, as we call it, fear, uncertainty, doubt. But I do want to talk about how the threat landscape is shifting, especially in the last couple of years after COVID. So let's just take ransomware attacks. Now, there are a lot more ransomware attacks than these statistics. These are the public ones that are well known in the news because they're big companies like JBS, the meat company, Colonial. These are those types of ransomware incidents. Big ones, well known, get on the news. So if we look at 2020's numbers compared to 2021, we can see ransomware has increased. If you take the same data and you go back and compare 2019 to 2020, you see the same thing again. Ransomware has increased. Now, why is that? I think several of us who work in security, when everyone went to working from home with COVID, we saw this coming. People are working from home. They were distracted. Children at home, trying to keep things together, afraid, and it became a really tense time. And people were less careful with the security decisions that they made. We saw this with social engineering engagements. Our agency does a lot of social engineering engagements where we do phishing, voice phishing, etc., for companies to show them how to secure their human layer. And it was amazing how much more successful we were in 2020 than we had been in years prior to that. There was a dramatic increase in the success rate. And why was that? People were distracted, working from home, trying to keep the children settled while they have meetings, et cetera, et cetera. Now, numbers have still been slightly elevated when we do social engineering engagements compared to prior years. And yes, that is a mixture of our skill improving from an attacker's perspective. It has, however, gone down from what we saw in 2020. And that is because some people are going back to the office, children are getting back in school, and there's less distractions. So we who work in the industry saw this coming. When everyone went to work from home, we knew this was going to be a bad year for cybersecurity. People were getting laid off. Security teams were getting laid off. We saw this early in the year with Carnival, right? They pretty much gutted their company of employees. The security team was pretty well gutted. And what do we see? Within a couple months, they had a security incident. We have companies like JBS. We all, or many of us, were affected by the JBS breach, right? There was the meat supplier got hit with ransomware. They had to shut down, and that halted production for a few days. We were affected by the negative consequences, and that made big news. And what happened? The US government stepped in, the JBS paid the $11 million ransom, and the US government paid a cyber firm to get that money back. This was big news. Incidents like this bring big attention to cyber criminals, and that's the last thing they want is attention. So while they might make money, a lot of money off of these kinds of incidents, they bring negative attention and pressure from the government, and that's the last thing criminals want. We have seen, quote, a Rubicon cross when it came to security incidents over the last couple of years. Then we saw the Colonial Pipeline incident. Colonial Pipeline hit with ransomware, shut down, gas shortages, gas prices rising in parts of the country. They paid a huge ransom, $5 million, to these criminals. Now, where does that money go? Sure, this is organized crime. They have to pay their bosses, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of that money goes back into the infrastructure of attackers. They're improving their infrastructure, hiring better employees. They're getting more sophisticated and better at what they're doing. They're making more money. It's a bad cycle we're in. Then what happened? With the hospital issues, hospitals became sort of don't touch those for security for cyber criminals. Um, they pretty well knew if they touched a hospital and that had impact on patients because of COVID, they would be in deep trouble. Colonial, JBS, this has brought a lot of heat on them. And what we even saw that with one of these cyber criminal groups going dark, quote, retiring. They came back with a new name a few months later for PR purposes. They know what's going to happen to them. They're going to bring down the might and the anger of the government and several other governments in the world if they continue. They can't go after those companies. So who do they go after? They've turned their attention to the small tier, small, mid-sized companies. Who are they going after? Companies that have insurance that they know will pay. Small, mid-tier companies who they can't just say, no, we're not paying, we're failing over backups, etc. Companies that they have a high belief that these organizations are going to pay them. Why did we see insurance, a cyber insurance company hacked? Well, it's very likely that the criminals wanted records of who had insurance. So now they can go target those companies because they're going to pay. This is about money. Now, there are struggles for small tiers, but let me preface this section with this. Small companies have a huge advantage when it comes to cybersecurity. They have a much smaller attack space, an attack surface. There's less infrastructure, fewer employees. It's harder to target small companies. We see this when we do social engineering engagements, penetration tests. Smaller companies with smaller attack surfaces are more difficult to attack. There's fewer ways in. You have to be better at the one way in that you can get. So that is actually an advantage. And you can use that to your advantage. If you really harden those few ways into your organization, you're going to be at a much greater place than big companies who have marketing teams spinning up servers, websites, connecting to databases, and doing all this stuff. The security team has no idea what's happening. Now, that being said, there are some struggles that happen at the small tier and are unique. And we'll look at these. First of all is cost. There's no doubt cybersecurity defense can be very expensive, but it's not hopeless. Some research by various groups, security groups, believe that companies should spend about 6 to 20% of their IT budget on security. Now, when that comes to smaller companies, of course, they have smaller IT budgets. That means smaller security. Some cases that can work, sometimes it cannot. It really depends on the organization and what you have to protect. And we'll get to focusing on that when we talk about the roadmap we've developed. Now, back to the story I talked about the bank. They had 3 shifts of SOC analysts, Security Operations Center analysts, investigating incidents, 3 shifts of multiple employees per shift. A small business, you can't do this. You just simply can't afford it. This is one of the costs of security. According to Indeed, other job boards, the average salary of a SOC analyst is $109,490 a year. 3 SOC analysts, 1 for each shift, that's $300,000 a year. Most companies don't have that to spend on security. Most small companies and startups, there are other ways. You can hire outsourced. You can get your IT provider to help take on some of those security responsibilities. Virtual CISOs are a great way for startups trying to get SOC, ISO, and all these different compliances. But there's still things you can do within your own means to secure your organization. Because, okay, you think we'll get a consultant. The average cybersecurity consultant rate is $225 to $300 an hour. And as you probably guessed, security takes time. It can get very, very costly implementing security controls using consultants. Now, again, this is something that can inhibit small businesses, but you have ways. Then, aside from the cost, there's a time commitment. Security takes time. Someone needs to, and even once you get your controls in place, someone's got to be monitoring. tweaking, adjusting them, etc. Because the cyber threat landscape is constantly changing. Attackers go from one to one to one thing constantly, and your program needs to be able to adapt. So when we talk about time, the average security investigation time. So in a normal security operations center with the standard items, SIM, firewalls, et cetera, they get on average, again, these are average numbers, 25,000 security alerts a day. That is a lot of alerts. And it takes the average SOC analyst about 10 minutes to investigate each alert. Okay, you break that out by an 8-hour day. And what do we have? We have a situation where SOC analysts cannot get to every alert that comes in. That's why fine-tuning your systems is so important. Getting rid of false positives so that you actually see the things that are important. So what does that leave? How can you secure your organization without spending all the time, without hiring consultants, without spending thousands of dollars on training, tens of thousands of dollars on courses to learn, going to Reddit forums where you get unpredictable answers? What do you do? And I was in your shoes. I was a systems administrator for a small company. I understand the struggles. This was a small company, 500 employees, multiple locations, and I was the best at security. So I got, quote, put in charge of security. I'm an IT support technician in charge of security. And every time I proposed a project, it got shut down for budget reasons. I'd say 85% of my proposals were shut down because of budget concerns. Upper management didn't seem to care about security. And that can be a huge issue. It wasn't a priority to them. Anytime I'd bring up security-ish topics, things that we could do to improve. Now, my boss, the IT director, he was completely on board. He wanted to implement these projects. It was upper management who shot him down. They'd say things like, what do we have that an attacker cares about? We don't have any valuable data. We don't have any confidential information. We're not a regulated industry. We don't need to spend money on security. Why should we spend that money? We're not a regulated industry. We're not going to get fined, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was constantly disappointed. Everything I suggested got shut down. Those few that were low cost or we could use open source tools would make it through. And eventually the company did get hit with ransomware. Several projects that I'd been trying to get implemented to improve security would have stopped the ransomware. And then what happened? Insurance came paid. They did a huge security revamp and totally revamped their security, partly for the proceeds from insurance, partly with proceeds from the company, because now they saw the importance of security. It doesn't have to get to that point. I left the company, went on doing consulting security much later. And like I said, we've been working with small companies for several years now. And as we've worked with company after company, we started seeing a pattern. And there's certain steps that need to be done before others. And this led to a strategic security roadmap that we follow for all of our small business security clients. Now, you can build security based on whatever security framework you want, NIST, ISO, CIS, anything. But this roadmap is that proven strategic road that brings success every time that we've helped our clients through this process. The first phase we call organizing. And the organized phase is all about getting the foundation right for your security program. When in this phase, what are you doing? You are doing things like getting a management committee on board, get upper management on board with the project. They're the ones that provide the approval. They're the ones that approve the funds for security. time, if you need extra team members, etc. Now, you have to speak in their language. If you come to upper management, fear, uncertainty, doubt, this, and this can happen. There's a chance this can happen. We need a firewall and we need this and that, a data loss prevention, whatever. They have no idea. That doesn't mean anything to them. They speak company profit, risk, loss. That's what they understand. They're business people. You have to approach them in a way that they can understand. And this is something we've helped our clients do. And then once you get management on board, you need to communicate that support that management, upper management has. They're on board. Maybe you establish a committee and you meet once a quarter, once a month, give them a status update. Take that support and you need to communicate that to the employees in the company. Let them know you're going to be seeing changes coming. We're on a path improving security. There's things that are going to affect you. The way you do things are going to change. Management is on board with this. Management has approved. We need you on board. We need your help. We're a team. We're a company. We're working together. Then you need to establish your organization's risk tolerance. We have tools for this. When we help our small businesses, startups, we have tools to help them understand what is their risk tolerance. That goes back to upper management. They need to understand the cost, the impact of various security threats, and help establish what is acceptable risk, what risk will be transferred with insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But they need to set that initial bar. What is your risk tolerance? Okay, the next phase is assessing. You cannot begin securing what you don't know exists. We saw this with Equifax, right? The Equifax breach that impacted millions, hundreds of millions of US citizens, private data, social security numbers, the most sensitive information leaked. How did that all start? It all started with a server that didn't get a patch, an update, cost nothing, a simple update because they didn't know it existed. It wasn't in an inventory and they forgot about it when they implemented those patches. And that is why assessing is a very, very critical component in a security program. So when we're with our clients, we spend an entire phase of their security program doing assessing, creating a data inventory. We have templates that we use for this. Create that data inventory. What data do you have in your environment? Where does that data enter? Where is it stored? How is it accessed? Who is it accessed by? How does it leave your environment? Do you share it with vendors? How does it enter your environment? Do you have web forms? Is it manually entered? It could go on and on. Mapping out that data, how it travels through your environment is very important so you understand where data needs to be secured. Because not everything needs to be secured equally, right? We don't need to secure the janitor's tablet that he keeps a spreadsheet with a checklist that he knows what to do every day nearly as much as we need to protect that server with all of our PI on it. Now, yes, that tablet needs security controls in place because it could be used to access, right? We could pivot from it, but we don't need as robust of encryption, say, on that tablet as we do on that server, okay? Because that data, understanding that data map, data is in different places. Then we create a hardware inventory. We want our clients to know every piece of hardware on their network, who the manufacturer is, the brand, what model it is, who that's assigned to at any given moment, the firmware version, the software version, is it getting updates? Is it automatically updated? Does it have to be manually updated, et cetera? And a software inventory. As a leader in security in your organization, you need to know what software is in your environment. If you don't know what software is there, you're not updating it, you're not patching it, and you're leaving yourself vulnerable. Now, we need to control. We can't have employees adding third-party software that's not approved that you don't know about. And there are security controls that you'll need to implement to keep that in check. All right, phase 3 is planning. Once you've got management on board, you've got your risk foundation, you understand your environment, what's in there, what needs protected. The next phase is planning. And when we're working with our clients in the planning phase, we are using a some kind of security framework. You need to use a framework because I can follow Bob's security best practices. Now, Bob is probably overlooking something. He's probably forgetting something that is important for security. I don't even have my own security plan. I use a framework, something like the NIST cybersecurity framework, the CIS critical security controls from the Center for Internet Security, ISO, any of those security frameworks, SOC 2, using a framework that has been vetted and reviewed by many professionals in this industry so that it is not missing security controls. I was on the panel that helped develop the last version of the critical CIS security controls, the critical security controls from the Center for Internet Security. I was on that panel. We spent an entire year going through control by control. How should this be updated for the modern threat landscape? And when there was a discrepancy, we'd go back and forth, figuring out what is the best route forward for the people that was intended for. And that's what happens with these security frameworks. They are well vetted by security professionals. And there were some pretty big names from the industry, from some of the biggest companies in the US with the best security on this board helping with these discussions. So planning is an important phase. Use some kind of framework. Then we have a policy and procedure checklist to help determine, okay, what policies do you need? Everything in your security program should be guided by a policy. Policy says we are going to implement strong passwords with X minimum characters. Then you have procedures that say, okay, now we're going to go to our Windows servers, Active Directory, and we're going to create rules to enforce these policies that we have in place. When should you ever be audited by a third party because of an incident, whatever? I can use healthcare as an example. They want to see policies. What are your policies saying you're going to be doing? You should have policies outlining what you're going to be doing. If you don't have policies, how do we know? Then are you abiding by your policies, which we'll get to here in a second. So we walk our clients through creating those policies, creating procedures, the ones that they outline that they need. Then we do a gap assessment against whatever framework they want to use to figure out what security controls are missing. And that gap analysis helps determine the state of each security control. Is it functioning the way you think it is? Do you have it? Is it in progress? Is it being planned? It's likely that you can't implement everything all at once. You might need to create a timeline of when you're going to implement. And that's another part of this phase. There are budget restraints. Maybe you have X amount of money a month for new security initiatives, X amount to maintain what you have. And you might have to plan out 6 months, 12 months, the security controls that you're going to implement. You still have a job to do, right? There are still other responsibilities. Planning is very important. And again, back to if you're audited by a third party, some kind of governance board, and you can show that you have a roadmap in place, you're going to be much better off than if you had nothing. Okay, phase 4 is what we call the implementation phase. And in this phase, we're walking our clients through researching every security control that they have, researching the tools available, the tools within their budget, figuring out, okay, there's 5 solutions that can do this one thing. Which is the best for us? What are the pros, the cons of that particular tool for our environment? The integrations with other tools we might use in the future, the learning curve, how difficult is it to implement, etc. Those are all things to take into consideration as you plan out which tool you need to use. Then start implementing those tools based on the outline and that timeline that you created in the last phase. Take one project at a time to implement those security controls correctly. Implement physical, technical, administrative controls, policies, etc. This is a huge phase, and it takes time, it takes dedication. Once those controls are implemented, they need to be maintained. There's no such thing as set it and forget it in security. You need procedures in place, policies in place, how you're going to maintain these, people in charge, okay? If you have a firewall, as an example, an email security gateway, as another example, you need someone responsible for this control to go periodically. They need to be maintained. They need firmware updates. They need to check, is this firewall still working the way we think it is? Is there something that needs modified? Are you looking at the logs? If you're not looking at the logs, the output, how do you know what's happening in your environment? And that, because of a lack of doing this, a lack of proper maintenance, is why the dwell time of attackers is so large. On average, statistics tell us the average dwell time of an attacker is about 6 months before they're discovered. And that's because people simply aren't looking. They aren't maintaining their security controls. So use audit those controls regularly. And we help our clients create audit checklists, audit procedures, how to audit these controls on an ongoing basis, making sure they are functioning properly. Okay. You have a clean desk policy. Do you have someone going, looking, making sure the desks are actually clean? Okay. Assign an employee for each security control. Maybe people get multiple controls to be responsible for. Maybe it's a one-man security team and he has to do everything. Create timelines for maintaining these controls. And the final phase is evaluation. In the evaluation phase, this is the phase where you're creating an actual audit plan. Okay, so you're probably maintaining them, but you need to go periodically and audit that they're working the way you think. Can they be bypassed? Do they need improved, etc.? Create an audit plan for every one of your security controls so that you're regularly checking that they're functioning, they're operating as expected. And in this phase, it might be time to bring in a third party. If you've come to this level of maturity, you might need to bring in a third party to check what you've done, to be sure it's functioning the way you think, you're not overseeing something. Then also, it's important that you're comparing your metrics on your security controls. Do you have some way to measure what they're doing and compare those metrics to what they should be? Are they meeting the goals? Okay. As you do this, as you audit, as you evaluate, as you look at those metrics, bring those back to that committee, back to upper management that we talked about, that we've created, to update them on the progress of your security program, where you're still lacking. Show them those metrics. Where do you need more funding? Where do you need more support? Where do you need to bring in a partner to help you? That's something that is outside of your expertise. And again, conducting third-party audits is very important. Bringing in a fresh set of eyes is a great way to ensure that your security controls are up to place. So that's the process we walk our clients through. Now, in each phase, there are tons of things I could go into, all kinds of templates and checklists that we've created to help our clients. And again, this is not necessarily a linear path. Yes, each control might have a linear path, but this is a constant cycle because we're constantly evolving, we're constantly adapting. So you're going to be doing this in a constant circle. Think of this more like a circle than a line. So yes, we might get our initial security program from 1 to 6, but then we're going to go back and we're going to keep evaluating, keep improving, keep measuring, keep planning, keep implementing new controls, new configurations, etc. Now, our team has helped hundreds of clients through this process, but we understand that not everyone can hire us. People want to be able to do this on their own. And this is the question that we started getting from small business. Help us, tell us what to do. Show us what we can do. So we put together an academy. And we started this academy last year very quietly with some beta companies, helping them through our process, our roadmap, providing it to them in training and those same resources that we use for our clients, risk assessment frameworks, etc. Giving it to them that they could go and implement. And some of these companies have had astonishing success over the last year implementing based on this strategic roadmap. So we started a beta group. We kept it quiet, worked through these companies for several months, helping them in their program. We opened again, let some more people in. And we saw great results with these individuals, these companies that we've been helping. We created this academy based on our own experience. When I was a sysadmin, my team members We understand the struggle small businesses have. We understood getting our proposal shot down, no budget, no ability to add manpower, needing to do things within our own means. We've worked with clients in the same condition. So we took what we have developed, our processes, and we put it into our academy. We have our roadmap in there for our customers to follow. They can go through those same phases completely on their own to begin implementing those security controls. There's training. We want all of our training to be very practical. So each training focuses on a very specific item in security. And all of our courses are less than an hour to show you exactly, so the members can come, watch that training, go implement it. Okay. They're at the phase where they need to create a data inventory. We have a video. We walk you through how do you create a data inventory? Go get the resource that we've created for you to go create your own data inventory, keep moving down that roadmap. And there's a private community. So you can ask questions. We're in there, other professionals are in there, your peers are in there. You can ask about tools they're using. It's a great community, a private community that's safe, that you can ask questions. You're not going to Stack Overflow, Reddit, and asking questions from anyone, getting anyone's opinion, and then potentially leaking information about your organization out on the public. So like I said, the Academy has been private. We've done a couple, quote, cohorts in the Academy, but now we're opening up it again. We want to help more companies, help more small companies, help startups improve their security. So if you're interested, if you like that roadmap that we showed you and you would like some help, some resources, check out the InfoSec Academy. There's training, there's a private community. We do regular live sessions where we'll just answer questions, talk about emerging attacks, things that you can do to prevent them, etc. If that sounds like that can be useful to you, check out the Academy. It's a very low monthly rate, charge on an annual basis, very affordable. Any small company could take what's inside this Academy and go and implement it for themselves. So that wraps up our session. Go back, use this roadmap. This is the same roadmap we take all of our consulting clients down. You can go implement those same phases that we've talked about today. Go and do that in your organization and become better secure.